episode contains foul language. Always check the description of the episode for a more detailed list of episode-specific trigger warnings.
Welcome to Keep It Weird, the podcast for all things strange and unusual, spooky and scary, spine-tingling and goosebump-inducing, and everything in between. Every episode we get together to chat about something weird. This week, however, is an exception. We have been releasing episodes for Keep It Weird now for 8 years, and in those years we've told many scary stories. This episode is a celebration of creeping each other out, a fiesta of freaking our beans, a jamboree of just about pissing our pants. This is a mega-sode of listener ghost stories throughout the years. Over an hour and a half of thrills, chills, shrieks, and screams. This episode is not suitable for scaredy cats. It contains sound effects and music that may send you over the edge and is dedicated to you, our lovely listeners, fans, friends, and patrons. My name is Ashley, and this is 8 Years of Fear, a ghost story special. Hi, it's me, and my producer voice is officially turned off. This was a weird week, timing-wise. I was traveling, Lauren got sick, but we couldn't leave you hanging without some content, and I've always wanted to go through past listener ghost stories episodes and pick out some of our absolute favorites. So if not now, when? And if not me, who? I've split these stories into 5 categories, but the stories themselves have come from all different seasons of our show. We're going to start in one of the scariest places to have an experience, inside your own home. It should be your refuge from the cruel, cruel world outside, but sometimes even your safe space becomes far too spooky.
So Ashton says, "Hey gals, my story is somewhat about my oldest child who is now 9 and about a few houses that we lived in. I'm so glad to hear you guys mention that activity is more prevalent when there is a small child involved. It happened often when I was younger, to the point that my mom always thought that I was haunted. I had at least 5 spirits visit me that I can remember vividly. Between me telling my mom about the people I saw and my sleepwalking, I definitely kept her on her toes. Now, my son Jude was right around a year old when things started happening with him. On more occasions than I can count, toys in his toy room would start singing or making sounds at different hours of the night.
No.
My sister experiences that with Josie all the time. These were toys that physically had to be turned on or touched for them to work. Yes, we have heard it, and it's awful. We lived with my mom at the time, and she would always joke and say things like, "Here we go again," or she would simply just talk out loud and say, "That's enough, we're trying to sleep." I like her mom a lot. One evening while I was at work, my mom and Jude were at home, and he was sitting on the kitchen floor playing and babbling what words he knew at age 1. All of a sudden, he looks down the hall to where my mom is sitting and says, "Me, Ma, I see somebody." Nope.
No, thank you.
My mom about died, LOL. She said she was so scared that she wouldn't even go in the kitchen to get him. I'd be the same way.
You're on your own, kid.
You're on your own. She stayed at the end of the hall and was trying to coax him to come to her. He finally did, and they didn't say any more about it. Jude and I moved out shortly after, and I noticed small things here and there, but nothing substantial. Right before he started kindergarten, we ended up moving back in with my mom. The house she was living in was so tiny, so being the great mom she is, she decided to rent a bigger place, and we would all have our own room. We went to sign paperwork and get the keys and clean, the usual move-in business. We both mentioned on several occasions to each other while we were cleaning that we kept getting a whiff of a musty man, like a mixture of aftershave and BO. It wasn't a constant smell, and when we did smell it, it was as if someone was just walking by and you were catching the passing smell. Jude wasn't at the house while we cleaned, and we didn't mention it to him at all. We all moved in and had been there just about a month. The basement creeped me out, and of course the washer and dryer were down there. It's always in the creepy basement. I almost couldn't breathe when I was down there. It felt like someone was always with you. One night, Jude is in the dining room playing, and he's just having a full-blown conversation with someone. My mom asks who he is talking to, and Jude replies, Bob. He lives here, and he does not like you, Mima.
Oh,
I know.
No.
So, of course, the color drains from her face, and she says, tell me about Bob. Jude answers, he smells like onions. Now, I don't know about you, but BO has always smelled like onions to me.
Yeah.
And at 4 years old, saying someone smells like onions makes more sense than knowing what body odor is. Absolutely. So things just keep getting fucked from there, she says. Not necessarily with Jude, but with the house and quote-unquote Bob. If I was home alone, I would hear someone in the basement moving things around, and when I would go down and check, then I would hear footsteps above me. When my mom started dating my now stepdad, he would stay at the house, and he woke up in the middle of the night a couple times freaking out because something had grabbed his ankle and jerked his leg. I feel like we talk about that motion on the podcast a lot, and it is truly a nightmare, and I can't imagine that sensation waking you up in the night. I saw him several times passing down the hall. She's talking about Bob now. I saw him several times passing down the hall, or he would be in the microwave reflection just standing behind me. No, Ashton, no. It was becoming so frequent that it wasn't even scary anymore. He was just a part of the family at this point. Well, unless you're my stepdad. He refused to stay at the house anymore, LOL. My mom mentioned to me that she actually saw Bob several times walking into my bedroom. Cool.
Great.
She said that's the only place she ever saw him. Not long after she and my stepdad moved in together and Jude and I moved in with my now husband, nothing really happened, and Jude will still occasionally just bring Bob up. I brought up the whole situation to my mom about a year ago, and she gets this really serious look on her face and tells me that something happened in Bob's house that she's never mentioned to me before. She's a very religious woman, and while we lived there, she ended up calling her friends over from church. I'm talking apostolic, speaking in tongues, laying of hands, religious people.
Oh, boy.
They came over with anointing oil and cloths and prayed over the house and specifically over my room. They anointed the doorway and put the cloth with anointing oil behind my bed and in the closet, which I actually found when we were moving out, and she totally blew me off when I asked about it. She said when they shut the door, she could hear faint screaming and scratching and saw a bunch of shadows going back and forth under my door. Caps lock. What? I mean, in all honesty, I'm glad she didn't tell me this while we were living there, but at the same time, I say again, what? Thank you for reading, Ashton.
Oh my God.
I know. Like scratching and screaming after they shut the door.
I wonder what happened though after that.
Right.
Like I wonder if like activity slowed down.
Yeah, did things
or
stop?
did
Did
Bob
it work?
just stay out of the bedroom?
Right. I know. Crazy town, USA. I'm glad they got out of there because it sounds like things really chilled out once they moved. And Jude is just kind of like, remember, Bob? But it doesn't seem like he's bothering them anymore. But I had never heard a story like that before where you anointed a room, shut the door, and like could hear things in agony. Like it sounded like whatever they did was working, or at least putting someone in pain. But
yeah, well, I wonder, the agony could be seen as like, oh, this is a demonic presence,
Right.
and that's why, or it could be seen as like he didn't want to leave his room.
Yeah, 100%.
That's his room.
Yeah, why are you trying to evict me from
And
my
now
room?
I can't be in here because of your little spell you cast.
Yeah.
And now I can't be in my room that I shared with my wife for X amount of years. Or
Bob
you know
was
what
just
I mean?
trying
Like,
to live, and it was
Yeah.
Ashton that was stepping on his toes. Jeez.
Ashton was killing my vibe. Anonymous says, a few years ago, my ex-boyfriend's best friend bought a house and we all moved in together, plus my dog. I tell this story all the time, and I don't honestly care if people believe me or not. Sometimes thinking back, I even ask myself, was that real? But it was. It started out small, like every once in a while I'd get this twinge of fear or discomfort when I was alone in the house. Then I started noticing my dog refused to go in the basement. Refused. The basement was unfinished and had rough walls and dirt floors in some parts because the house was just old. But that's where the laundry was. I noticed she would follow me to the first landing on the stairs and then sit or lie there watching me, but she would not for the life of her come down. I even tried feeding her down there once, coaxing her with treats. Nothing. One afternoon, my roommate and I were watching TV in the living room, and I started hearing some sounds like doors moving or floorboards creaking, and they just didn't sound right. But that's crazy, right? So I didn't say anything. Eventually, my roommate muted the TV and asked, "Are you hearing that?" It sounded so distinctly like there was a person in the house with us that when we went upstairs to look, he deadass stopped me on the stairs just to say to me, "I just want you to know I have a gun in the house."
Oh. What?
There was nothing there. But, that's how sure they were that they were hearing someone
dang.
upstairs. That he was like, "I have a gun, just so
I have
you
a
know."
gun. We might need protection. Oh my gosh.
After a few weeks, the feeling of discomfort when alone in the house was very, very palpable. It was so uncomfortable to be there alone. One afternoon, again, I was sitting in the living room watching TV, except this time I was alone with my dog. The stairway's to my right. My dog suddenly jumps up and is looking right up the stairs like she sees something, and she starts barking, and I try to quiet her down. She calms down for a second, but then keeps getting up and barking, staring up the stairs, walking up to the bottom of the stairs, and then backing away and growling, and repeat and repeat. She is freaking me the fuck out.
Yeah.
My heart is fully pounding, and I need her to stop. So I figure I will take her upstairs, I will show her there's nothing there so she calms down. Because there's nothing there, right? Because I'm alone in this house. So I kind of gently guide her up the stairs, and sure enough, there's nothing there. I decide I might as well tidy up my room while I'm up here, so I walk to the end of the hall and I flip on the light to my room, and the light bulb pops and sparks and goes the fuck out. So at this point, I'm like, okay,
Oh, goodness.
either there's something here and you can run away in fear, or there's something here and you can stay and show that you're not afraid, or you can calm the fuck down and stop being jumpy because this is just a weird coincidence. Those are the three options. So I decide to stay. I walk across the room and I start making the bed, and my pineal gland just starts screaming at me that there is something in the room with me. And the hair on the back of my neck rises, and my dog starts to growl in this dark room. And then the blinds to my right snap up and start spinning.
No.
Which
I don't know what I would do if that
Leave
happened. I
town.
would maybe just be paralyzed in fear. I don't know if I could move.
call the police.
Yes.
Leave town. I shit you not, I dropped everything, I turned around, I grabbed my dog and my bag, and I ran out of the house, and I did not come back until everyone else is home. But that's not even the worst. A few weeks later, I woke up dreaming in the middle of the night, sort of floating somewhere between awake and asleep, and in this lucid dream I think I'm having, a man in a suit comes out of the closet, walks across the room, and leans down over my ex-boyfriend's head like he's going to whisper something in his ear.
Nope.
In real life, my ex-boyfriend rolls over and pushes me a little and says, "Babe, stop wiping stuff on my face."
No. Ashley, you have to stop telling the story. I'm losing it.
This is the worst part. The next morning, when we woke up, my ex said he had a strange lucid dream where someone came out of the closet and whisper screamed in his ear,
"Are you happy now? Are you happy now? Are you happy now? Are you happy now?"
Good gravy. Shut up.
"Say what you will, but this shit happened. It was a dark period in my life and my ex's. I truly think that something in that house fed off of all of the pain and anger in us both that we were carrying around, and I think that genuinely gave whatever was there enough of its own energy to actually manifest itself." And then the last thing they say is, "We moved."
Yeah. What a perfect way to end it. I was literally going to ask. That was my first question. Did they get the hell out of there? Holy buckets. That was creepy.
I can't.
Okay, so this is from Last Dances. Thank you for letting us use your story. So excited. Okay, so Last Dances says, these events started in 2012 when I moved into a converted fire station that was built in the late 19th century.
Nope.
I was 27 at the time. I love the immediate nope.
Nope.
Because you're right. I was 27 at the time and of sound mind and decent health, and I've always been fascinated by all things paranormal, but at the same time, I would consider myself a non-believer or a skeptic. I moved into the top floor of this duplex in the fall of 2012. The building was beautiful. It had a brick facade with climbing ivy vines, a large bay window on the ground level, and French doors leading to a wrought iron Juliet balcony on the second level. Gorgeous. On moving day, I met my downstairs neighbor, Roger. He was extremely friendly and helpful, albeit constantly drunk. He had knocked on my back door to let me know that I was welcome to park under the carport or use his furniture on the back patio. He even gave me a framed copy of an old photo of the house when it was a fire station, and I still have it somewhere, which was very cool. He told me some general history about the building, that the firehouse was built in 1980, but was converted into apartments in 1910, and it was the town's first fire brigade, and at the time, fire trucks were still being pulled by horses, which I, did not even in my head realize that was ever a thing.
I've never thought of that before.
Yeah,
holy
but it's like,
crap.
yeah, I guess.
Yeah, okay, sure.
I love it.
I know what I'm dreaming about tonight.
Right? Exactly. It's like, thank you for this history. Roger's apartment would have been the horse stable and garage, and my apartment would have contained the sleeping quarters, kitchen, and presumably some sort of office for the fire chief. Towards the end of my first week of living in my new home, I was unpacking boxes on the living room floor when I heard 3 distinct knocks at my door. First, I just assumed that it was Roger coming to tell me about trash day or the laundry or some other mundane thing, so I got up to answer the door. But then I started to think how late it must be for a neighborly visit as I'm walking towards the door. And then just before I reach for the knob, I stop because I suddenly remember that this is an interior door. There was an exterior door at the bottom of the stairs, as well as the interior door at the top that led into my house. And though it is possible for someone to have a key to the lock on the exterior door, it was a deadbolt that had a switch mechanism that disabled the key function from the inside, and I always used the switch to lock myself in at night, and was fairly certain I had done so on this occasion. So I did not answer the door. I somehow managed to survive this knocking situation without being too weirded out, and things were quiet and uneventful in the house until December. I woke up one morning freezing cold, and it smelled salty? I couldn't place the smell. It wasn't good or bad. It was just foreign. So I walk out of the bedroom towards the kitchen, and I notice that it's also very loud in my house. It sounds like cars are driving through my dining room. And that's when I see that the French doors that lead to the Juliet balcony are wide open. It had snowed a few nights before, and the vehicles in the street below are rolling their tires through the melted ice and mud. That unusual smell was the brine that our city uses to coat the streets after a snowstorm. Typically, my balcony doors were each secured into the door frame with a sliding lock, and there was an additional set of screen doors that kept it closed with a hook that was still latched. So much like the last strange occurrence, I'm almost positive that I had securely locked the doors after the last use. But even if I hadn't, this whole door system fit so snugly into the frame that it couldn't be blown about by the wind. Since the outer screen doors were still latched, I'm pretty sure no one climbed the ivy in the dead of night and broke into the balconette. It's another mystery. So after the French door incident, I lived without any notable experiences again for quite a while. As much as I loved the home I'd made for myself in this converted firehouse, I never quite felt settled. I had to sleep with the TV on every single night. 3 or 4 times a week, I'd be woken up before my work alarm because it felt like someone had screamed into my ear.
Stop
I could
that.
never... Right? I could never decipher the screams and just chalked it up to weird dreams. Then, in late January of 2014, I was coming home from an evening class. I got a strange feeling that something wasn't right inside the house before I even put my key in the lock. I looked up and noticed that the curtain panel on the door had been moved as if someone had been looking out of the window. I hesitantly walked up my stairs expecting to find it burglarized. Nothing seemed to be missing or out of place. Was someone playing a prank on me? Was I going insane? I grabbed a broom to use as a weapon and went through each of my rooms checking on the locks and windows, and then I go into the kitchen and all of my cabinets and kitchen drawers are open. Just wide open. I continue my search, but all of the windows are secure and I don't find any monsters, human or otherwise, hiding under the beds or closets. Almost a month had passed, and again I was coming home from an evening class when I got that strange feeling again. Something was amiss in my house. The curtain was moved to the side exactly as it had been before. So this time I run upstairs expecting to find the drawers open again, but everything was exactly as I left it. I turned on every light in my house, checked every window, door, closet, and crevice, and there was no sign of forced entry. I'd almost forgotten about the incident completely later on that night as I'm in my kitchen washing the dishes and my dog is laying on the couch in the living room. She's in my direct line of sight and I keep looking at her periodically, and then as I'm rinsing my last plate, I call to the dog that it's time to go potty. I start walking towards her and I'm only a few steps away when the light in the living room shuts off. Instinctually, I just assume it's the bulb or the fuse, so I reach for the switch, but it was in the off position. I mess with it for a few minutes to try and replicate the condition where it could have turned itself off, but I couldn't. The toggle wasn't loose, the switch was very firm. It was either on or off. So I call my friend to talk about all my weird feelings, the phantom light switch, everything. She answers and I launch into my story, but she stops and says, "What's that sound? What are you messing with?" She said it sounded like I was rustling or wadding up paper. And all of a sudden, during this phone conversation, we start to hear another conversation bleeding into ours. We could hear a man and a woman's voice but couldn't make out what they were saying. My dining room chandelier begins to brighten and dim slowly, keeping in time with the static voices coming out of my cell phone. Nope, I decided it was time to get the fuck out. I walked my dog, I packed a bag, and I headed to my friend's house to stay for a while. And that is how the story ends, Ashley.
Oh my word.
I messaged this person. I said, "Last dances, can I use your story?" And they were like, "Sure, credit my username, yada, yada, yada." And then I follow up with, "Is there a part 2? Is there an update? Like, you went to stay at your friend's? I know that you're still alive because this happened in 2014. But like, what else happened?"
The ghost wrote the story.
It could be, but my gosh,
know.
I am waiting for their response. They haven't logged on to Reddit in a while, but I'm hoping, guys, that I will have an update for you one day because I have to know what else happened at the fire station. But
it was so funny because, like, at first you were like, it's a brick building with a balconette and climbing ivy on the side, and I was like, I know this building's going to be haunted, but like worth it because that sounds amazing. But by the end, I was like, okay, I can't live like that.
All right, I wouldn't be able to do it.
Nope,
Not if all of my cabinets and drawers were open when I got home. I could do it.
Woof. Those were scary. Are you happy now? Just kill me. I can't. Let's take a quick breather. Not all of the ghosts we encounter on this show are scary and evil. Occasionally, we meet an awfully sweet one. Okay, JP. It's his brother's story.
Okay.
And it was validated nearly 2 decades after it happened. Okay. JP. My brother Mark was 12 years old when my grandfather in Glasgow, Scotland, had taken ill and wasn't expected to survive. My parents took the next available flight to Scotland and had to leave us kids behind in Chicago.
Hey.
I was too young at the time to understand what was happening, but Mark had figured out that our Grandpa Joe was dying. Mark was very upset by the news and was heartbroken that he couldn't go see our grandpa one last time. I was too young to have had the privilege of knowing Grandpa Joe, but from the stories I have heard, he was a very loving man who adored his grandchildren. A few days after my parents left, Mark went into the basement of our house to grab clothes from the drying machine. When he reached the bottom of the stairs, he froze. About 30 feet away from the foot of the stairs, there's a doorway to a utility room in the basement. Just as Mark reached the bottom of the stairs, he saw a figure step into view. It was Grandpa Joe. He was smiling at Mark and holding a white box. He didn't say anything, but he smiled and then walked past the doorway and was gone. My brother ran back upstairs in hysterics, telling our babysitter that he had seen our grandfather and needed to talk to my parents. The babysitter reluctantly let my brother call Glasgow. And when he reached my parents and told them the story, they tried to soothe him and tell him that everything was okay, that his imagination was playing tricks on him because he was worried about Grandpa Joe. Well, Grandpa Joe had passed away while my parents were on their flight heading to Glasgow, and my parents didn't have the heart to tell Mark the sad news over the phone. Fast forward to 20 years later, my brother and I are visiting my mom in Florida, and one night we stayed up late talking about family, and eventually the conversation turned to our Grandpa Joe. After reminiscing about our grandpa and his good nature, my brother said to my mom, "You and Dad never believed me when I told you that I saw Grandpa in the basement." My mom looked puzzled and asked Mark, "When did you see Grandpa Joe in the basement?" My mom had remembered talking to Mark the morning that her and my dad arrived in Scotland, but she hadn't remembered the specifics of Mark's story. Mark retold the story, but this time when it was over, my mom was speechless. After a few moments, she broke the silence and asked Mark to describe the box that Grandpa Joe was holding. Mark said that it looked like a white rectangular box that was about 3 feet long and had a width and height of about 1.5 feet. Something about the description of the box made my mom get tears in her eyes. She collected herself and then told us both, for the first time, that one of our aunts had a stillborn baby at almost the same time my grandpa passed away. The child and Grandpa Joe were buried in the same grave, and the child was buried in a small white coffin.
No way.
What?
No way. And he saw him holding this little white coffin.
Yeah.
Because he had gone.
He saw his Grandpa Joe in the basement holding a small white box.
Oh my gosh.
And then 20 years later,
the truth came out.
found out that he was buried with a small white box. Okay, let me gather myself here. The tiny white box. I can't. My heart. I can't. The good news is, however, if you do need to flee your home in the middle of the night to escape some creepy ghosts, you can always go camping. But these next stories may make you think twice about staying in the great outdoors. This next storyteller is remaining anonymous. This is a short one, but it's really interesting, and I am fascinated, and I need your thoughts.
Okay.
Anonymous says, I was camping with my husband and his family at a small remote lake in our state. Our state, New Mexico, has always had many stories of paranormal activity just about everywhere. Well, on this camping trip, there were about 10 of us off the shore of the lake, and one other group of people camping, maybe like 6 of them at the next site over off of the shore. It was nighttime, and both our group and the other were doing typical activities, making s'mores, having a few drinks, telling stories, when all of a sudden, we all heard what sounded like a little girl yelling out for help. The other group of campers asked us if we had any children in the group, and we didn't. Neither did they. But we were all positive that we were hearing a little girl and decided to search the area that we heard the noises coming from together. Smart.
Mm-hmm.
Rather quickly, we found something. There was a field behind our campsites, and we all saw a very tall, pure white figure standing maybe 100 feet away from us in the field, making these noises.
Nope.
We all agreed this thing looked maybe 6 feet tall, skinny, and white as can be. Everyone got quiet, but we were all together still, and we made our way closer to investigate. Whatever it was that we saw started backing off as we got closer until it disappeared behind some trees. Every single person in both campsites was freaked out by this, and that night when we tried to sleep, we continued to hear those little girl calling for help sounds. It gives me chills to think back on this.
No, Ashley, no. So a 6-foot white horrid demon was making little girls screaming sounds in a field?
Yeah.
That's what you're telling me?
Yeah.
I'm never sleeping again. I'm so happy I turned a lamp on.
Creepers.
I'm gonna cry.
Where'd you get that pure white skin?
Oh my god.
What the fuck
Seriously,
was
what
this thing?
the actual fuck? I am livid that you brought this story into my life. I'm so scared.
I wish I was in a state further away from New Mexico. I don't like this at all.
I have a story from Gracia, which is a beautiful name.
Oh, that is a
She
beautiful name.
absolutely had to spell out the pronunciation because I was
Yeah.
like, who? Gracia, thank you, wrote in, and she actually had a ton of stories, which this is why I love our listeners, because they'll just submit like paragraphs and paragraphs. She has a lot of stories that involve her father, and I'm going to read today ones that are just about her dad when he was younger, but she did submit ones of her and her dad, more in the present day. They now live in Washington. That we'll save for another time.
Yes.
And I always like to read the beginning of their emails because our listeners are so cute.
Oh, they're so sweet.
She says, okay, I want to start this out by saying this is my favorite podcast to listen to, and you guys are my favorite people, my kindred spirits. I wanted to share some stories that I've been sitting on for a while now with no outlet, so be prepared for one long-ass email. Okay, so here we go. My father was born in Oaxaca, Mexico, way down south in a tiny little village deep in the mountains and the jungles. My dad's first freaky experiences happened here when he was very young, but they were so incredibly disturbing to him that he has remembered them very clearly some 50 years later. First, some context of where he grew up, as this will be important. In the village he grew up in, it was very remote, and the area at this time, in the 60s and 70s, southern Mexico, was very undeveloped, and his home was 40 miles to the nearest town with electricity. So there was no electricity, no paved roads, only small dirt roads, and barely any people. So very dark, very quiet, very remote. Growing up, my dad was responsible for walking through the mountains and jungle at night when he was as young as 5 or 6 to deliver food to his father, who worked in the coffee fields miles away. Can you imagine this life?
No, I can't.
One night, as he was making his way home, he heard something that sounded like a group of people talking a few yards ahead of him. He could very clearly make out the sounds of men, women, and children talking to each other. Keep in mind, this is the dead of night at like 3 in the morning in the middle of the jungle. But my dad, being only 6 at the time, was hoping that he could catch up to the group and then maybe he could walk back to the village with them so he wouldn't be alone in the middle of the fucking jungle. However, as he tried to catch up with them, they never seemed to get any closer. He could still hear them, and he tried calling out to them a few times, but he never got a reply. Eventually, he tried running to catch up with them, but he couldn't see them, only hear them as though they were nearby beyond the trees. Suddenly, the sound of the voices stopped, and all he could hear was the crickets and the wind through the trees. My father stopped in his tracks and strained his ears to see if the group was still nearby. He didn't hear anything, but what he did hear a moment later immediately terrified him. Somewhere above him, on the hillside of the mountain where he was walking, he could hear something like the sound of something huge coming towards him, and it was growing louder and louder. The sounds of branches breaking and leaves being shaken violently were coming toward him very fast. My father immediately darted forwards and leaped to the ground just a few feet away as a giant boulder the height of a full-grown man broke through the trees and hit where he was standing just a second ago, completely destroying the path he had been walking on.
Is his name Indiana Jones?
Yes, it is, and that is the twist. Indy! After this, he immediately got to his feet and ran home, never encountering a single soul on the way. Now, my father has 2 minds about this. Either the phantom group was leading him to safety, or they were leading him to death by putting him in the path of the rock. We don't know, but it very much bothered him. Now, around the same time and same place, but just during the day, one afternoon, my father, about 6 or 7 now, was making his way home along a small dirt path leading down from the mountains. The grass is a little tall here, but from his position at the top of the hill, you can see pretty far away. As he began walking, my father noticed a man walking along the same path coming towards him. However, this wasn't unusual, as many men did use this path, but what was weird was the man. He was dressed completely in white from head to toe, a white hat, white shirt, white jacket, and white pants. These were not the clothes of a man going to work or the clothes of any man my father had seen before. As he kept walking, my father grew more anxious about the man as they drew closer together. The man was walking very calmly and slowly as though out for a stroll in the park, but his eyes never looked anywhere else around him, only forwards towards my dad. As they got closer, his eyes eventually... as he got closer, the eyes were definitely on my father. When they were only a few yards apart, my father grew nervous from this man's constant staring, so he looked down. When he looked up just a moment later, the man was gone. The grass is only a few feet tall in this area, so he could not be hiding there. It was as though the man had completely vanished without a trace, leaving my father alone in the middle of nowhere. Suffice it to say, Mexico is a little fucked up when it comes to the paranormal. My dad has told me all sorts of weird stuff about where he grew up, like the crazy fact that before he was even born, there was a family who lived in the mountains, and the woman, the mom who had lived there, her baby was eaten by a jaguar. And
Oh, my
apparently you
word.
could still hear the mother and baby crying when you're up in the mountains. Fucked up, right?
Holy cannoli.
So her dad has a crazy childhood.
I wonder does Mexico have any Bigfoot stories?
Oh, I'm sure.
Because the boulder throwing,
Mm-hmm.
that's a big Bigfooty thing.
Before. Right.
But the whole voice is that he was I don't know
Yeah,
where that
hearing the
falls in,
voices
but-
and the guy in white.
So this next story was sent in by another Reddit user, Time Trigger. That's time_trigger if you want to look him up on Reddit. And this story is bananas.
Oh,
Okay.
gosh.
When I was 12, my family lived in a house that had a very large pond behind it. Think less of a pond and more of a very small lake. So when we first moved to this house, the neighbor's son was always out at the pond fishing. And when I would talk to him, he would swear that there was an absolutely huge catfish in the pond. He really wanted to catch it, but was never able to. He said he knew that it was there because he'd seen it eat some of the baby ducks and geese that lived there. He said he watched them get sucked down under the water while swimming on the surface. I thought it was super interesting that a fish could eat baby ducks, but I never really gave it a second thought. The neighbor's son eventually moved out. He never did catch that catfish. After living there a few years, I was probably around 16, I finally saw what my neighbor's son was fishing for, or I at least saw its effects. My friend was spending the night just hanging out playing video games all night on some random weekend when we heard the ducks on the pond completely losing their shit. This was around midnight, and normally we didn't hear the ducks inside, so we had to see what was going on. At first, we didn't notice anything. It just seemed like the ducks were going crazy every once in a while for no reason. Around 10 to 20. We had a lot of ducks and geese on this pond. One day, my dad counted like 300.
Jeez.
Around 10 to 20 would fly off of the pond for a little while and then come back down the whole time, just freaking out. And then we noticed it. Ducks were being pulled under. We watched as several ducks were pulled under the surface by something, and all the ducks around it would flip the fuck out and move away from the spot. It was insane, which already gives me the chills. I hate water.
It's so eerie.
I have seen ducks dive for food before, and this was not that. They would kind of struggle as they were being pulled down, throwing their wings and head up as they went down. It seemed like something was grabbing their legs and pulling them under. And let me clarify, these were not baby ducks. These were full-grown adult ducks being pulled under and not resurfacing. Next day, we told everyone, and very few people believed us, as these things usually go. Never really saw anything like it again, and had stopped thinking about it until one night, something happened. It was a cool summer night. The window was open. I was playing a game on my Nintendo SP when I heard something outside. It sounded like someone with big, sloshy, wet boots was stomping through mud. I was sitting on my bed next to the window looking at my SP when I first heard the sound. It sounded like whatever it was walking down the fence line to the pond. I jumped off my bed to go look out the window. And when I looked out, I saw what I can barely describe. At the end of our fence, about 20 feet away from the pond, was this giant brown and black mass of something. The size of it was around the size of a small car, and it was rounded, kind of like Cousin It, with two shiny black eyes near the top, and it was looking right at me.
Excuse me?
As soon as my eyes met its, I collapsed with fear. I have never felt anything near that level of fear before in my entire life. One time I almost died car surfing, and the fear I felt then was a drop in a bucket to what I felt when this thing's eyes looked straight
Into
at
my
me.
soul.
I laid there on the floor, unable to move, unable to breathe, and listened to the creature walk to the pond. I heard splashing, and that was it. I laid there for what seemed like hours and eventually moved to my bed and stayed awake in fear all night long, and I just stared at the window. No idea what it was. I think about it often.
I would think about it every day for the rest of my
It's
life.
a giant catfish that walked its ass out of the pond.
What the hell? Where
It's
did
like-
this take place? Did they say?
No, it didn't say.
I'm very curious if this is like a weird cryptid.
I know. I need to find out. I did ask. He said my neighbor's son was not the only person to talk about the big fish in the pond. It was kind of an urban legend in the neighborhood, but no one ever got a real good look at it. People just noticed the effects, like giant splashes, snapped fishing lines, and of course the baby ducks being eaten.
Right.
My friends and I were the only ones to witness adult ducks being eaten that I know of.
Ugh.
And this is kind of crazy. The houses surrounding the pond have all had issues with mild vandalism, broken benches and fences, but I've mostly figured it was neighborhood kids until that night. Now
was
I'm
it
not
neighborhood
sure.
kids or a
was the
giant
giant
walking catfish that wanted to come break your bench?
Ew.
Ew.
I still think about that big fish man. His squishy steps haunt my dreams. I hate him so much. Now, I know my voice has to be getting annoying at this point, but for some reason, I'm always the one who ends up sharing stories from this next batch. Our listener ghost stories don't always contain ghosts. Sometimes they are a little bit more out of this world. I'm shifting gears a little bit here. I'm moving away from the haunted houses and moving away from the paranormal and shifting towards the supernatural. And I'm very excited. This story is sent in by Riley. And Riley says, when I was in 6th grade, I woke up one day with 4 very small holes on my upper right thigh. It looked like the skin had been cut out in perfect tiny circles, yet there was no blood. The circles were in a straight line and across my thigh horizontally, no more than 6 inches wide completely. I also felt very tired and I couldn't remember what I had dreamt, which is weird for me since I pretty much remember every dream I have every night. I put band-aids on them and went to school as usual. The next morning I wake up and there are 3 new holes right above the previous 4. I woke up once again very tired and drowsy and was now weirded out by how symmetrical everything was that I showed my mom, who said it was most likely an ant or spider bites. The next morning, 2 more holes above the previous 3, and the morning after that, 1. This is when I was seriously scared, since the holes now formed a triangle that pointed to my knee, and they weren't even scabbing over. There was no blood or anything. I was so tired and confused, and I was scared to go to bed, so I stayed up really late, but woke up the next morning not even knowing when I had fallen to sleep, only dark and then morning. When I did wake up, I was suddenly very alert, and when I threw my blanket off my legs, I found that all the holes were completely gone. No scarring, no scabbing, or any trace of the circles on my thigh. I showed my mom and she just brushed it off as if they had healed like any other cut.
Mom.
I'm honestly not sure if this is related, but I do feel like there's a correlation. After this happened, I couldn't comprehend math anymore.
What?
I had excelled at math all my life, but after this incident, it was like numbers had no meaning to me and I couldn't figure out simple equations. I went to an advanced school and had been learning algebra and geometry and was doing great, but then it was like poof, all my math knowledge and comprehension was gone. To this day, I can't even do simple addition problems without double checking them. Now, as for recurrences after this, I haven't had anything physical happen to me again, but I do have constant dreams of being skinned alive in a very white and large room where there's a constant humming of voices in the background. I always find it strange that the skinning always begins in my pelvis or upper thigh area, and I can always feel the hands doing it, but I can never see anything. The hands are very hard and cold and move very slowly over me, and I can feel every little thing they do, yet I have no ability to do anything about it. I will also note that when I have these dreams, like clockwork, it will feel like I've been sleeping for hours and hours, but when I manage to wake up, no more than 20 or 30 minutes have passed.
Whoa.
Excuse
Oh
me.
my gosh.
So,
what is going on there?
aliens? Like,
it sounds
I have no
very
idea.
alien, but also I have no
What?
clue.
I don't know.
What's going on?
I promised another alien story.
Yay!
And I thought this one was perfect because it also came from a police officer. But this officer is based in Michigan, not on the West Coast. And again, not allowed to say his name, but he is a sergeant. And he is, I don't know if I could say he's from Illinois, but this took place in Michigan. Okay. I was a few months off of field training when I received a call for a suspicious incident in the southwest zone of our jurisdiction. Dispatch advised the caller saw a single light in the sky. I was a few blocks north of the location of the call when it came out, and I heard what sounded like an electrical transformer blow just a few minutes before the call came out. I just assumed the caller had seen the flash that typically accompanies these little explosions.
Mm-hmm.
While I was en route, dispatch further advised that the subject had made statements indicating the light was what dispatch referred to as of the biblical variety, as it had made him feel warm. Great. For those that are not familiar, there's a very involved relationship between mentally ill and law enforcement. Here we go again.
Mm-hmm.
It
Look
seems
at
that
that.
the number of mentally ill interactions for law enforcement has drastically increased and doesn't seem to be going anywhere anytime soon.
Definitely not.
I request any prior interactions we have with the subject, and dispatch relates what you'd imagine. Numerous calls for people in his house when no indication of such was located, angels in his bedroom, civil disturbances for talking to himself on the train platform, pretty much the standard offering of someone suffering from a mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
Also an officer safety alert. Awesome.
Great.
Stupid transformer. I arrive on the scene and I find a man standing in the snow on the sidewalk with a good brown winter jacket, soiled blue jeans, and a pair of white New Balance shoes. I remember the shoes were just immaculately white with heavy wear on the outside edges. The subject, we'll call him Tim, has the most peaceful expression on his face with his hands clasped in front of him in what I would call the communion hold. If you've ever received communion and cup your hands to receive your Jesus wafer, it was like that.
I know it well.
Tim waves to me as I park. I walk up and introduce myself. Hey, sir, I'm Officer so-and-so. How you feeling today? Tim cuts in with an impossibly long run-on sentence, the gist of which was him asking if I had seen the light and accepted God's angel into my life. Sorry, Tim. I must have missed that one. I already know what happened, and I don't want to spend any longer than I have to because psych committal paperwork sucks. So I launch into a perfectly reasonable explanation of how a transformer blew in the area and the light that he saw was an explosion, blah, blah, blah. The whole time I'm talking, Tim is smiling and shaking his head at me. That's when he tells me it was not a flash of light, but a large circle of light that made no noise. It floated above him rather angelically for what Tim perceived was hours and cast a light on him that warmed his skin, aka God's touch that expelled his demons. As the large circle of light moved away, Tim told me that the electrical box exploded as the light passed over it.
Oh.
This is where I am going to tell you that I have a morbid fear of UFOs. Legitimately, I hate even talking about them. At this point, I'm quick to disprove Tim as I don't want to even entertain the notion. I cut Tim off and ask for his ID. He hands it over, and I find out that he lives just a couple houses down, and I'm quick to try and convince Tim to return home, as I'm sure it was nothing. I begin inquiring about his meds, illicit drug use, alcohol, the works. It all checks out. Tim is kind of just a standard crazy dude. Cool, time to get him home. Tim shows me his watch. It's a Casio with a Velcro band, and the face of which is on Tim's inner wrist. Where the numbers would normally be, there are these little O's. They're the weird little digital zeros that you get on a calculator, where they are narrow at the ends and have little spaces between them. If you've ever spelled boobs with a calculator, you'll know what I mean. There's some other dashes on the screen. No biggie, Tim has probably been wearing that watch for 30 years, and it's probably been broken for 29 of them. But I start to ask Tim if I can accompany him back to his home when I notice something that still gives me goosebumps, even now. Tim and I are standing in a large circle of slightly melted snow. I have a pain catch in my chest, and what could possibly be my first ever panic attack. Internally, of course, no one likes to see a cop hyperventilate and shit himself. I look closely at the circle and see a razor-fine edge. The interior of the circle looks like melted snow and is kind of subset below the outer edge. It looks like someone turned a burner on underneath the snow and was melting from the bottom down. Additionally, I see Tim's footprints walking into the circle from down the sidewalk in the direction of the house. The footprints outside of the circle are fresh and have these nice sharp edges. The ones inside are rounded and look like they have spent a day or two in the sun. My prints in the circle are fresh as well. At this point in time, my cover officer arrives. One is usually dispatched whenever we have officer safety alerts on a subject. It's my former FTO. Good. Me and him are close and I can panic a little in front of him. I pull him by my car, explain everything. He tells me he heard the transformer pop and believes the circle is due to gas or a sewer, essentially something terrestrial. He's calm about it and I want to believe him. He takes over and walks Tim back to his house as he makes sure no medical treatment is needed. We're finally done here. I get back in my car and I try to clear myself from the call on my laptop, but the MDT is completely frozen. Not unusual, just annoying. I mic up and I tell dispatch I'm 10-8. I am asked to repeat as I'm all static. I drive down the road a bit and it goes through. Not unusual, our radios do suck. I take my phone out to call my former FTO and tell him just how far down the rabbit hole I went with that before he got there. My phone is locked up on the keypad screen. I have to pull the battery out to restart it.
Whoa.
This is a little unusual. That's never happened before. After a reset, I call my FTO and he essentially tells me to think horses when I hear hoofbeats, not zebras. I feel like an idiot, and I don't tell anyone because as a probationary officer, I can be let go rather easily, and UFOs aren't covered in department policy.
Sure.
I don't drive down that street for a couple months and really try to forget it. I get a call for a burglar alarm at a house at the cul-de-sac at the end of the same street. The homeowner tells me he had only had the alarm trigger once before. I ask him when, and he tells me when he saw a large light glide over his house a few months back. Fuck me. I don't go down that street alone at night, ever.
Whoa. So a completely separate person on that street said
Confirmed.
The only other time this happened was
Yeah.
when that light went over.
The only other time that...
Just like Tim.
Yeah, his security system randomly went off was when Tim also witnessed
confirmation.
a light in the sky that like perfectly melted a circle of snow around
Right.
him.
That
And the
is
fact that like all of his
crazy.
electronics weren't working.
Everything was frozen.
The transformer blew.
That's a crazy coincidence. I know he kept
all
saying
of it together is
like,
pretty.
yes, this happens. Sometimes our radios suck, but it's weird that all three things
Yeah.
were reacting.
That's the thing is once it starts to add up.
yes.
It's like, okay, Tim's watch is broken.
Nothing.
He's a crazy person. Probably not a big deal.
right.
My radio sucks.
Yes.
I'm all staticky.
If you look at those
Fine.
separately,
Yeah,
it's
but
normal.
all together, it's kind of like,
It's
all
a
right,
lot,
what
yes.
the fuck is going
What
on?
the hell?
But here is the story from Anonymous. Anonymous says, I'm going to change the names of any people involved, but the places and road names will all be factual.
Okay.
It was early summer, 2010. I only remember because my 21st birthday had just passed and I was finally legal to hit the bars. It was a Friday night, and I was up having a drink at a bar that my cousin David was the bartender at. It was very early in the evening, and I had just gotten out of work for the night working at a McDonald's in another small town less than 10 miles from the small town that I lived in. I was on only my second drink of the evening when my phone rang. On the other line was a friend of mine from childhood, James. He was calling, asking if I wanted to come over to his brother's house and join them for a night of poker, beer, and weed. And it sounded like a good time in my book, and since I was literally only one sip into my second gin and tonic, I agreed to make the drive into Toledo. It was about a 20-minute drive from my small town, and I figured it would be a good time. I stopped at home to grab some cash. I left my house at 11:05 p.m. I remember that distinctly because I had called James to tell him I was on my way, as they were going to wait for me and start the poker game at 11:30. I took my usual route over to his brother Eddie's house, as I have done many times before. We had all gotten together with a group of anywhere from 4 to 6 of us and would play poker in Eddie's basement at least twice a month. I had just gotten to the corner of Oakdale Street and East Broadway. I was sitting at a red light in an area that's nothing but residential housing outside of the elementary school that sat at that exact corner. I'm sitting up, looking at the red light, waiting for it to change, which always seemed to take absolutely forever coming from this direction, when I noticed something in the sky that from my vantage point was partially hidden directly behind the red light. It was very bright white light that seemed to be pointing straight down, almost like it was a helicopter using a spotlight to identify something, but much, much brighter at the point of origin. I heard absolutely nothing after rolling my windows down, and I knew this couldn't possibly be a helicopter or I would absolutely be able to hear it. Wanting a better view, I pulled into the parking lot of the ice cream shop that sat directly across from the road from the school on the corner, and I got out of my car to try and figure out what this thing was. When I got out of the car, I stared up into the sky and immediately found it again. It could not have been a plane because it didn't have the right shape. It was more oval than anything else. Most stories you hear like this say it's circular, but this was definitely an oval shape. I almost thought perhaps it was a blimp, given the shape, but it seemed far too large to be a blimp, even by the measurements of someone everyone knows, like the Goodyear blimp. Plus, it had no decals or identifying marks. It was silver or grayish all the way around. After what felt to me about 30 seconds or so looking at this thing, my eyes started to burn. Not burn in the sense of extreme burning or anything like that, but almost like that feeling of when a bug or some dust flies into your eyes and causes them to water up, and it like hurts when you blink. So I closed my eyes and I began to rub them. My eyes are closed at this point, so obviously all I see is black. And after finally getting my eyes to stop bothering me, I try to look up again and find it, only for it to be gone. I looked all around, but I couldn't see it anymore. And this is a very densely populated neighborhood with houses, trees, etc., able to obscure any view of things you look up into the sky to see. So after a little less than a minute, I decided, oh well, time to go play poker. So I get over to Eddie's house, which is about 4 blocks from where this had taken place, and I knock on the basement door. A few minutes go by, no one answers, so I decided to go to the front door and knock. I figured maybe since I'm probably 5 or 10 minutes early, they could be upstairs playing PlayStation. I knock on the door, but still, no answer. Finally, I start knocking very loudly on the door, almost pounding. Eddie finally answers the door and says, "Man, why the hell are you knocking on my door this late?" I look at him honestly confused, and I said, "Your brother said to come over and play cards with you guys." He stares at me for what felt like an eternity and finally responds, "Yeah, man, I know he did. He called you 5 or 6 hours ago, man. It's 4:30 in the morning. How late did you think we would be playing?" This scared me quite a bit, as from what I had remembered at this moment, it could not possibly be any later than 11:25 to 11:30 at most. I attempted to play it off and say, "Damn, man, I must have lost track of time. Can I use your bathroom before I head back home?" And he agrees, and he tells me I should splash some water on my face, as I look like I'm either drunk or haven't slept in a week. I walk to his bathroom. My eyes are absolutely bloodshot, and it almost looks like I have 2 black eyes.
Jeez.
To this day, I have absolutely no idea what happened to me that night. I have no explanation for the lost hours worth of time, how I could not have possibly noticed that much time had passed, or how on earth my eyes got irritated, red, and bruised. I don't want to pretend to know what it was and explain it, or even assume that whatever it was I saw that evening had anything to do with it, but it has creeped me out ever since.
Wow, 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 wow. Loss of time, object in the sky. We all are thinking the same thing.
Mothman.
Definitely Mothman.
Well, that was actually something that happened with Mothman, the irritated eyes.
That's
and
true.
A couple other UFO sightings as well, where people have said that their eyes have been irritated. The truth is out there, weirdos, and in some cases, that truth is right in your backyard. Yikes spikes. Do we need another breather? I think this is a good time for another breather. Let's check out another sweetie pie before our final category. But every once in a while, the universe gives us a little nod, and it really changes the way that you see the world. And it makes for a very sweet story. So this next story is from Reddit user Friendship Wins and their lovely girlfriend. So Friendship Wins says, "This summer, I bought my girlfriend a last-minute birthday trip to go kayaking around the San Juan Islands off the Washington state coast. After a long drive and a ferry trip, we found the tour group of about 20 people, and then we were shuffled into a shuttle van for a ride to the beach. Now, my girlfriend has a unique name similar to the name of a famous painter. Let's say it's Rebecca Warhol, just for fun. It's not. She's a little ray of sunshine, and she started chatting with the middle-aged woman sitting next to her on the shuttle as we waited to leave. The woman noted that she had always loved the name Rebecca, as it was her mother's name. They made pleasant small talk in the van until the tour guide passed around the sign-in sheet for all of us to fill out, and that's when things got strange. My girlfriend wrote her full name on the sheet and passed it on to the woman, who immediately shouted, 'Oh my God,' and started crying. After a few minutes of total confusion, she told us Rebecca Warhol was my mother's full name, and these islands were her favorite place in the world. She passed away this summer from cancer, and we've traveled hundreds of miles to spread her ashes here."
Oh my gosh.
We were stunned. I literally picked a random date, time, and tour company, and then we were split into the same group as this woman, and my girlfriend was sitting right next to her on the shuttle.
Yeah, they were side by side.
What the hell? She
universe.
continued saying, "My daughter told us that Nana Rebecca would be with us on this trip, and I didn't believe it until now."
My heart. That is beautiful.
It was the most unbelievable coincidence we had ever experienced, and has totally convinced me that there's more to this world than we think. As my brother later said, the universe winked at us that day. That's so sweet.
That is so sweet.
That's
That
so
is such like a gift from the universe.
Yeah.
Like, that was a completely beautifully orchestrated moment. The universe
know.
is like, I am pushing these two people together right now.
Yeah. And
Nana
who was that
Rebecca.
for? That could have been for anyone. That could have been for Nana Rebecca. That could have been for the woman who lost her mother.
Right.
That could have even been for Friendship Wins and his girlfriend.
Yeah.
Like, to
It's-
experience that. Like, it's
Right.
just really, really wonderful.
just fills my heart with joy. I love that.
Synchronicities! The universe! It's winking at us! It winked at them, it winks at you all the time. All you have to do is pay attention to it. Okay, for our final batch of stories, I have labeled this one Just Crazy Town. These are some of our weirdest, wildest, most WTF stories that you have ever submitted. This is actually, so it is kind of a story, but it's more, we're trying to figure out what's going on. So
Okay.
this was sent in anonymously. Basically, she wants to know, this is a question for you listeners as well, like, if you have any explanation for what this woman's going through, please let us know so I can
Oh,
pass it
no.
along, because
I can already tell by the look on your
I
face
can't.
this is going to be batshit crazy.
it's so insane, and I don't know what to tell her. Okay, so Anonymous says, a lady who works with my mom told us this story one day when they came over for dinner. We had been talking about creepy movies, and she decided to tell us about some of the weird stuff at their new place. They had just bought a house in the Wilmington, North Carolina area, had moved in, and everything was going fine, until one day she opened the silverware drawer and found a tooth sitting on top of the silverware.
Cool.
It was weird. No one knew how it got there, but they threw it away and tried to
Human
get on
tooth?
with their lives. A human tooth, a molar.
Nope.
A couple of weeks later, it happens again. Open the silverware drawer. Tooth. Now, it's super weird, but again, the tooth gets tossed out and ignored. It keeps happening over the next 6 months. They keep finding teeth every couple of weeks. They got a home security system with motion detectors and cameras and stuff because they figured they had a particularly sick prankster in the area. But even though they keep finding teeth, the system never detected anyone leaving the teeth. One day, she's at home and she gets a call from her husband telling her to get out of the house right away because the security alarm kept going off saying that all of the doors and windows had just opened at the same time. So she left for a few hours, but nothing had opened or closed. So the
security system was just saying that.
Was just saying that.
Huh.
Finally, they got fed up and went to talk to the lady who'd sold them the house. She still lived in town and had built a house that was almost an exact replica of the one they had sold to this couple. That in itself is a little weird, but she completely refused to talk about the previous house and basically shut the door in their face when they asked about it. They're not happy, but weird stuff is only happening every few weeks, so it's not enough to drive them out of the house or anything. The last incident that I know of was about a month or two ago. She went down to the basement to do the laundry, and when she opened the dryer, there was a tooth sitting on top of the clothes.
Jeez, oh man.
She says that she felt something cold hit her in the face, almost like getting hit with a pillow, and she kind of blacked out. Her husband found her a little while later, thrashing around on the floor. They called the paramedics, and she came back around, and she was totally fine. That's the end of the story. There's no resolution, no explanation, and no other weird stuff lately. It's the freakiest thing I've ever heard. What's going on?
What
Why
the fuck?
Why
teeth? That's what's throwing me off.
Why teeth, indeed?
Because I think it could be easy to toss around like spirit, demon, ghost, someone else lives there. But
I kind of joked about it and
tooth?
said, is it a ghost of a dentist?
Which is funny, but also like, well,
is there
maybe?
is there a body somewhere in the house and you're finding all these teeth and eventually you're going to find the rest of the body? And
What if it's one of those situations where like a little ghost girl, or it doesn't even have to be a little girl, but just a spirit or someone in another time is trying to convey that there is a body buried somewhere. And this is their way of leaving hints. Like, look, these are the teeth.
These are the
You have to dig up the body,
teeth.
though. These are your hints. I don't know.
I don't either. Like, it's a stir of echoes situation where the
Yeah.
ghost is trying to be like, I'm in the basement. Spoiler alert, guys. I'm in the basement.
Like,
I'm
come and
buried
get
in the
me.
basement.
Right. Like,
Someone
come
let
get
me
this
out.
body. I've been trapped here. And also the woman building almost an exact replica, like, did she conjure something up and then she moved out, is doing the same thing again in another house, and she's just going to keep building these cookie cutter houses and conjuring up spirit. He is going by his Reddit name is Dada is King, and then I found out upon further research that he's actually a musician, and you can Google him and find out, called King Dada, Dotta. Good chance I'm pronouncing that wrong and sound like an idiot, but I think it's King Dada. So look him up, guys. But he had this story from the airport that he worked at. He says, so I started my new job at Will Rogers Airport in Oklahoma City. And I say new job, but I was really just moved to a different airline and working in the same ramp agent position. Now I have to tell you, I have a crippling fear of heights, and my least favorite part of being a ramp agent is when I have to climb in the cargo bin on a rear-loading plane because it's about 20 feet above ground. This particular night was a strange mix of a few factors creating an uneasy feeling for me. The first ambiance setting condition is that it was raining, and not just light raining, but pouring rain with a few scattered lightning flashes and random power surges. So, already just the creepiest. Every now and then we have dead bodies transported in the cargo bins, and this was one of those occasions, and tonight was my lucky night apparently because my manager told me I was throwing the plane. Throwing the plane means I was pulling the cargo out of the bin. It was the last plane for the night, and there wasn't very much cargo besides this body. My coworker John pulled the ramp ladder to the plane, raised it up so I could walk up to the conveyor belt and enter the bin. About 4 other coworkers came over with a baggage tag for the cargo. And I say to everyone in a very loud voice, because the rain was loudly smacking on the airplane, I hope y'all are ready. I'm not trying to be in there all night. And John laughed and said, don't worry about it. Maybe you can make a new friend in there, in reference to the body. And I didn't think it was funny, but I chuckled and told him to shut up, just to be nice. I climbed into the small and cramped space and sat in the bin as far from this human-sized white cardboard box as I possibly could, and I pulled my phone out of my pocket to find a playlist to listen to while I threw the bin. I find a good one and I start working. The conveyor belt moves at a snail's pace, and you have to wait until they scan each individual package, so I can't just throw them as fast as I want and get out of there. About 10 minutes in, if I'm getting closer and closer to the box, and my music stops playing. I've had earbuds that short out when they get wet, so in the front of my mind, I'm just thinking the rain got on there and I just need to shake a little water out. But I pull them out and they're bone dry. I check Spotify to see if it was a glitch or a problem with the app, but I see I just have an unread text. Did I get a notification for GOT in the midst of my rap-fueled baggage handling? The way my phone is set up, when I get a message, it will tell you who it's from, but it won't say the message. You have to open them up. The message was from an unknown number, which was odd because very few people have my number to begin with. Click the notification, and all the message says is hi. I send a text back saying, hey, who is this? My phone displayed that whoever sent the message saw mine immediately after I sent, and I waited, but no response. Started my playlist back up, trying to forget about it, and just got back to my job. Shortly after a crash of thunder that was so loud the plane shook and made me jump, I noticed the conveyor belt was no longer moving. I yelled to John, what the hell is going on out there? Why did it stop? And John replied, damn thing ran out of gas. We're going to have to take this load of cargo to drop off while we get another loader over here, so just sit tight. And I think to myself, well, where the hell else am I going to go? And about 1 minute later, it got cold. Like, I could see my breath cold. And I wrote it off as just a cold front coming from the storm. I leaned over to lean on some stranger's luggage while I waited. As I look over a bag to grab, lightning went across the sky, and I saw a quick flash of a little boy. He was maybe 11, 12 years old, just sitting on top of the white box that had the body in it. He was staring at me with this eerily happy smile, and his head turned slightly to the side. My heart sunk, and I froze, never taking my eyes off that box for what felt like hours in my head. I was startled by the replacement conveyor belt starting up right next to the plane, and I darted over to the moving conveyor, crawling as fast as I could, trying to keep my balance in panic at the same time. I hit the ground, looked at John, and said, "Nope, I'm done. You're going to have to go in there yourself." And I didn't want to explain exactly what I saw, but John could tell I was scared, and he asked me what was wrong. I stuttered. I walked away, and before I could say anything, I got another text message on my phone. I heard the notification loud and clear this time. I opened from unknown sender saying, "Hi, it's your new friend."
Stop it.
And that was how he ended the story. But then people started to reply to him on Reddit and were like, excuse me, tell me more. So he left that job at the airport. He no longer works there. This only happened a little over a week ago. So this is super recent, and that makes me hate it even more. He has not received any more messages from unknown sender other than, "Hi, it's your new friend." And he also said that the white box, for clarity, was not a full adult size, but also was not the size of a baby. So it was very in the middle, the size of human it could have been. So it 100% could have housed an 11 or 12-year-old little boy that he saw on the plane.
Well, I have goosebumps on both of my arms.
I know.
That is
like, what
terrifying.
is this story?
This story comes in from Doug, who lives in St. Pete, Florida.
Hello, it's right by my parents.
Oh my gosh, maybe
So
they know each
cute.
other.
Besties.
So Doug from St. Pete says, "This is 100% true as it happened to me. Many years ago, before there were cell phones, we had these things called pagers strapped to our hips.
Oh, yes.
Someone would page you with their phone number, and you would call them back when you got to a phone. And as an on-call technician working in the audio-visual field, my pager would go off all the freaking time. Like most people who use pagers, our clients knew that if you followed up your number with a 911, that would indicate to the technician to stop what they were doing and call right away. Although I was always busy, I rarely ever got 911s. One afternoon, traveling from Orlando to St. Petersburg via Interstate 4, my pager goes off with a number I don't recognize, followed by 911. I find the first exit and pull into a little truck stop looking place outside of Plant City to use the payphone. This takes maybe 3 minutes tops. I walk in, I ask for some change, and I head to the wall where there are 4 payphones to choose from. I pop my quarter in, I dial the number displayed on my trusty pager. It rings and rings and rings and rings. And I'm thinking to myself, what the fuck?
Oh, gosh.
Who would page me with a 911 and then not answer their phone? It's just about then that I notice another ringing sound in addition to the one in my ear. I pull the handset from my ear, and 2 phones over on the wall, another payphone is ringing.
Nope.
But with
hate
an
this.
incoming call. I hang up my handset and the ringing stops on the other phone. I walk a few paces over, I pick up the handset, and I look at the phone number printed above the buttons. I look at the number on my pager. I look at the number on the phone. I look at the number on my pager again. I look at the phone again. And except for the 911, they are identical numbers.
Oh.
I kind of lose my breath for a second, and then I make my way over to the girl at the counter, and I ask if she saw anyone use that payphone. She said that I was the only person in the store within the last hour.
Nope.
The whole episode probably took 15 minutes, but man, I was freaked out. The hair on the back of my neck was standing straight up, and I just wanted out of there. I get about 10 miles down the highway and come upon a scene that looked like a bomb went off.
Ugh.
A four-car pileup involving a tractor-trailer hauling a load of steel that had come loose. State troopers and paramedics just arriving. I pulled over to the side and helped the best I could, but it was all pretty much over once it began.
Man.
I have no idea why I got that page or from whom, but what I'm convinced of is that if I hadn't, I would not be alive to write this today.
Yeah, it was like a warning.
Whoa.
But from who?
But from who?
It reminds me of, what's the name on, Mothman Prophecies? Oh, Ingrid Cold.
Indrid Cold. Yeah.
That Indrid. No, Ingrid.
Indrid.
Indrid.
Indrid Cold.
Yeah, Indrid Cold. It reminds me of that. Like
Yeah,
a number
kind of.
calling you. I know they didn't really hear any like voices or breathing,
Right.
but it's like the warning.
A number called
A
the
warning from the
pager
universe.
with 911, and then he stops at a restaurant. And the thing is like, if someone was trying to play a joke on him, how would they know where he was?
That's what I'm
This is not the
saying.
time of GPS, obviously. There's no cell phones, so there's no GPS.
How did they call that payphone?
So how did they call from that payphone
right.
to his pager?
Yeah. I don't
It's
understand.
just
That is bonkers
wild.
town. That was sending chills up my neck. Like
Yeah.
that, the more you kept going.
Wilder,
like,
too.
I know, he's freaking out. That's intense.
Obviously, if this happened, this took place quite some time ago.
Right.
Pagers, etc., payphones. But if this had just happened like a month ago, I'd be like, this is a Final Destination situation,
Yup.
and you need to get into a padded room right now.
Immediately and never come out.
Immediately.
100%. Yeah, that is really weird.
Really strange.
That's not even like scary. It's just bizarre and yeah, I
It's,
don't
yeah,
even
it's
know.
just one of
It
those
just
things
gives
where,
me
like,
the
at
tingles.
the end of the day, you're just like, I need
How?
a drink.
Yeah, I need a strong cocktail. Like what? Yeah,
What
and then seeing
happened?
that horrible accident and being like, "That what
Holy
if that was
shit,
me?"
that would have been me if I, or
Right.
could have been me,
Could
you
have
know,
been me. Right.
if I hadn't stopped to take that call.
Our next story is from longtime listener Justine, who writes in a lot,
Justine
interacts
B?
with us. Yeah.
Yes.
Interacts with us all the time. We're so grateful for you, Justine. We got a past life potential theory, story thing going on from Justine. So this is really
Love
cool.
it.
Justine writes, "Hi, ladies. I wanted to send you a cool thing that happened to me recently. I thought you would appreciate it. I've always been interested in the theory of past lives. It has always resonated with me. One of my first memories, and up to about age 7, was feeling like I was away from home. I knew I loved my parents, but I wasn't home. That's the only way I can put it. I used to cry a lot that I wanted to go home, and I just felt out of place. A few years ago, I had a very vivid dream. I was in what I thought was an apothecary shop, and it was around 1910 by the look of it. I was working behind the counter, and it was very cold. The stove wasn't working properly, so the people in the store were wearing coats and hats, including myself. I can even describe what the coat looked like because it was so vivid in my mind. It was snowing outside, and I got the impression it was Christmas time because there were decorations and windows. One of the people in the store was my grandfather. All at once, we heard a loud noise and crashing sounds. I looked out the window, and a streetcar was crashing and skidding towards the store. I rushed everyone out, including the man who was my grandfather. However, I didn't make it out.
from inside the shop at the time. The last thing I saw was my reflection in the window and the streetcar coming at me. I could describe all of this in detail as well. For years after this dream, it bugged me. I looked for articles centering my search around Toronto since it looked like King Street and I am Canadian. Finally, I recently expanded my search and I finally found an article.
No.
Reading it, I felt faint. So now I'm going to go over to the article that she sent me. December 24th, 1917, she had said it looked around 1910.
Yeah.
A streetcar went crashing into a confectionery shop on Christmas Eve, and it killed 23 people in the crash. It was happening in Pittsburgh, and this article was pulled from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and there is a picture of the streetcar and the confectionery shop on the corner that is just like demolished and crashed into, and crowds of people running around, complete chaos. And it's basically exactly what her dream was, exactly as she described, with only a few minor differences, but it is basically exactly what she had imagined, and it's just insane. So back to what she was saying. I had never shared the detail with my husband that the shop was on a corner. Looking at the sign, it was a confectionery shop, not an apothecary, which would explain why people were sitting inside. I'm still just floored. I'm so sure that I saw my death in a past life, and I'm so damn happy that I was right. I thought I would share. It's bizarre and cool, and I haven't shared it with a lot of people. I have had one other weird memory come up that was through a dream that brought up a lot of emotion as well, so I'm assuming there are more memories. I hope you girls are both doing well. Keep up the amazing work. It means so much to us weirdos. Ghost hugs, Justine.
Thank you so much, Justine. 1, love you. Love hearing from you. Love talking to you. 2, that is insane.
That is wild.
That's all the time we have this week for Keep It Weird. Thank you so much for tuning in to our Scary Stories special. We hope you enjoyed revisiting these tales of terror or hearing them for the first time. We will be back next week with a brand new episode of Keep It Weird. If you haven't already, please check out our YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/keepitweirdpodcast. If you like the audio version of our show, I really think you'll love the video. We add photos and videos from the topics we discuss, and there are very funny gags that you totally miss out on without using your peepers. So try it out, subscribe to our channel, and please, please, please consider donating to our Patreon at www.patreon.com/keepitweirdpodcast to keep this ship a-sailing. We love you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for 8 whole years of memories. Keep it weird.